Springfield's Talk 1041. Hey, everyone. Good Thursday. My name is Nick Reed. Have a show that we are going to do right now. We have one tomorrow, too. Tomorrow, Friday, is the Friday Road Show. We'll be broadcasting live at Scramblers from 6A to 9A. That's sponsored by Extra Mile Home Inspection and Real Estate Repair. We have some new swing state polls coming out, or that did come out yesterday. We'll talk about those. I'll just go ahead and tell you, Trump's ahead in all of those states. Meanwhile, Joe Biden in Milwaukee yesterday calling Trump a loser. Okay. Well, all right. I thought Biden was the great uniter. I thought we didn't like Trump because he was mean and nasty and name-called. I mentioned towards the end of the program, I think it was at the very end of the program yesterday, that RFK Jr. had revealed among his short list for vice presidential candidates, Aaron Rodgers and Jesse Ventura. Aaron Rodgers, I saw first a headline because, they try to click you in. They get you or bait you into click, and it was RFK Jr. announces quarterback. And I thought, well, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers was a, quote, anti-vaxxer. He took a scientific approach. He was an individual, though maybe some of his conclusions are debatable. He did not immediately, because government said, don't worry, there's absolutely no side effects whatsoever you have to worry about with these vaccines. Trust us, and ignore anything that you've heard. The scientific approach was, I don't think that's science. Trusting people in government just because they said so. So he, of course, was labeled a kook. So you see RFK Jr., and it's the people who did not automatically, because government told them to, act obedient and get the vaccine and trust it fully without question. That, a lot of those people are drawn to RFK Jr. So the Aaron Rodgers pick, I will say it does make RFK Jr. look like a one-trick pony, a one-issue guy, where it's like, that is it. He also mentioned Jesse Ventura. Now, the Jesse Ventura thing, for those of you that don't remember, he was governor of Minnesota for a while. And he drew a lot of attention because it was similar in nature to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but a little more eclectic, perhaps, is the best word. And it's sort of anti-style. I'm not a career politician. We just need to do things that make sense. Now, I would say Arnold Schwarzenegger definitely, without question, ended up being very, very establishment, and Jesse Ventura did not. Though Jesse Ventura seems to have been all over the map, and he is seen as a conspiracy theory. He has a show, or did have a show. In fact, there was an episode filmed here in the area, and it was conspiracy theory about the underground, and just sort of this idea that it's a hiding place for billionaires when the end of the world comes and so forth. And so, he's into a lot of that stuff. Now, I don't know that out of the gate, either of those options necessarily give any, what we might say is gravitas to the RFK Jr. campaign. Specifically, Jesse Ventura. Aaron Rodgers, however, could be a nightmare for the Democrats. Potentially. Because of Wisconsin. Now, RFK Jr., of course, he is not automatically on all of the ballots. There are certain hurdles that one has to reach. In Wisconsin, in order to get on the ballot as a candidate for president, in terms of signatures, a person only needs to get 2,000 signatures. And I think the deadline is August, and the signature gathering begins in June. That is not going to be a difficult thing to do. In Wisconsin, you're not going to have a real difficult time getting Aaron Rodgers, even though he's not with the Packers any longer. I mean, you can get 2,000 people to sign anything. Wisconsin already has a tendency to go with third-party candidates. In fact, Jill Stein is accused of giving Wisconsin to Donald Trump because she was on the ballot. And as a left-wing nut, some of the Hillary Clinton supporters voted for her instead of Hillary Clinton. And so Jill Stein is, by many people within the Democrat Party, seen as helping Donald Trump win. As close as it could be in Wisconsin, and given that, I mean, Trump is doing very well and beating Joe Biden in a number of these swing states, you put Aaron Rodgers as a vice presidential candidate on the ballot, and you're going to have maybe not an overwhelming number of people, but again, even though he's no longer in Wisconsin, you're going to have some people of Wisconsin that are going to vote for RFK. You know, these are these sort of swing voters. They don't really care. And maybe some people that don't even really ever vote, but they think, oh, this is kind of cool. I know he doesn't have a chance, but, well, wouldn't that be a real kick to see a former quarterback for the Green Bay Packers in the White House and vote? Or maybe they do go vote and they don't like Trump. They don't like Biden. They're just sort of doesn't really matter in the end anyway. We're screwed. And so here I have a chance to vote for a former quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. RFK Jr. is, and listen, as tight as this race could be, that once again could be the difference between who wins. While it certainly is in no way, shape, or form a silver bullet for the Trump campaign, you know, every little thing at this point, though we are still so far out from November, are things that need to be viewed as potentially significant when it comes to November. And RFK Jr. already in the polling has shown that he is much more harmful to the Democrats and specifically to Joe Biden in the presidential contest than he is to Donald Trump. The majority of polls in which you have Trump versus Biden, when RFK Jr. is thrown in there, sometimes he does take Trump votes away, but generally it ranges from, depending on the state, RFK Jr. takes an equal amount of votes away from each, or, which means ultimately irrelevant to that race between Biden and Trump, or he takes more away from Biden. We're not seeing polls in which he does more harm to Trump than Biden. And so, again, in Wisconsin, you add Aaron Rodgers to it. That certainly isn't going to hurt. RFK Jr., he's supposed to announce, I think it's the 26th of this month, whom it is that he is going to have as his vice presidential candidate. And, you know, of course, you think about November and football season, and depending what's going on with Aaron Rodgers at that point in time, you know, that's going to garner a lot of attention. I mean, it could bring a tremendous amount. If I'm RFK Jr., I think that's the route I'm going. Like, who else you are going to get, particularly in the season, you're going to get probably more attention to your campaign because of the Aaron Rodgers factor than any other vice presidential candidate's going to get you, and RFK Jr. certainly can use it. Now, I don't think anyone should delude themselves into thinking that it in any way, shape, or form is going to help him potentially win. But I'm telling you, the Biden people, if they're thinking this thing through and thinking it out, this could be much, much more impacting than they want to believe. A look at the weather coming up. Showers, thunderstorms are, of course, on the way right now. The latest news update. First Alert forecast sponsored by St. Clair. Of the Ozarks Home Improvements from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Showers, thunderstorms throughout the day. High of 77, 47 tonight for a low with showers and thunderstorms. Tomorrow mostly cloudy, 57 for a high. Saturday mostly sunny, a high near 65.
In the morning on Springfield's Talk 101.
From an observational standpoint, I like this RFK Jr. floating the Aaron Rodgers thing because I think it is going to it could arguably be the most impactful vice presidential pick a candidate has made. Now, not for RFK Jr., but in the whole scheme of things. I think about how when look at like Taylor Swift, for example, and Kelsey, and you couldn't watch a game without referencing her, right? Well, think about Rodgers. You think about these the NFL season. And I just don't think it's going to be possible if RFK Jr. picks him to be on the ticket for there not to be mentions of him running for the White House. That during press conferences, post-game conversations and interviews, while 95% may be about a game, maybe about the season, you know that there are going to be questions about that presidential race. And it's just going to draw attention. Now, the reason that this vice presidential pick is we've long looked at there's so much attention paid to vice presidential picks, and it just really, at the same time, is recognized as ultimately not mattering as much as it once upon a time did. It used to be believed that you looked at the electoral map, and if you were someone that you felt that you did well in the South, maybe you'd pick somebody from a different region of the country with hopes that that would help you get that state, particularly if it was a swing state. And so there was this strategic component to that, but that it just really doesn't any longer seem, they're not chosen that way any longer. Now, for the left, it's just all about identity. I mean, Kamala Harris was picked because she was a black woman, and that was it. Trump picked Mike Pence. Frankly, I don't know if anyone even really knows why he picked Mike Pence, but he did. And given you look back at the Ross Perot factor, if you want to call it that. And Ross Perot, who was on the ballot as a third-party candidate in all 50 states, had a tremendous impact. He was largely believed to be the reason that Bill Clinton beat George Bush, because Ross Perot was siphoning more votes away from Bush than he did from Clinton. I think Aaron Rodgers also, now, of course, already the media. You want to get an idea of how worried that the media is about this and about how this could help RFK Jr. get attention and enough votes of just people, again, that maybe they think it doesn't matter. We're going to hell in a handbasket anyhow, and so might as well, heck, vote for RFK Jr. and, you got Aaron Rodgers on there. Why not? And the recognition that could be the difference in some states between whether Biden wins or Trump wins. CNN is already out there trying to label Aaron Rodgers as somebody who thinks that Sandy Hook was a hoax. They're already out there doing it. In fact, there's Aaron Rodgers claims Sandy Hook never happened. This is, of course, CNN's reporting this. Now, the report is based off of somebody who works at CNN and has absolutely, best I can tell, no proof whatsoever, but just claims, well, he told me that once. And if CNN is anything, it's trustworthy. And then another individual who was quoted in anonymity. So for whatever reason, this source did not want to be made public. So you have one source that CNN won't say who it is, and another one who works at CNN that's like, oh, well, just trust me, he told me that once. Now, there may be some, I don't know, who knows, maybe. I have no idea. No idea what he thinks about Sandy Hook. No idea. Maybe this CNN reporter took notes or has an audio recording that comes out. But as of, and this is Breitbart writing, that reporter Pamela Brown claims Rodgers spoke to her at the Kentucky Derby, quote, claiming it was actually a government inside job and the media was intentionally ignoring it. That, of course, is quality reporting, where you are. This was supposed to be 2013. That almost a decade later, you're like, oh, yeah, he told me once this at the Kentucky Derby. It wasn't an actual report or anything I was doing. I wasn't working, but. Now, the point here isn't what he believes when it comes to Sandy Hook, whether this is true or not, but the fact that CNN is already doing what they can to torpedo this from occurring. Jesse Ventura, by the way, seems like an odd pick or a potential floating pick because I don't know where he is on vaccines and the COVID stuff at this point, but I know early on, and it was early on, but he had said during an interview that he thought the government should pay people $1,000 to $1,200 to get the COVID shot. Now, that seems a little bit counter to the ideas that RFK Jr. has when it comes to vaccines, like don't get them at all, particularly the COVID shot or specifically the COVID shot, to have somebody on his ticket that at one point said the government should use tax dollars to pay people over $1,000 to coax them into getting the vaccine. And he may have changed his position over time, but I would think for somebody like RFK Jr., anyone, even if they changed their mind when it came to the vaccine, that out of the gate thought that was a good idea. It just seems that doesn't really pass the RFK Jr. test. But if Aaron Rodgers is willing to do it, and heck, why not? I mean, really. I don't know that there would be any pick that would be better for RFK Jr., and I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. I don't believe that he has a chance of winning. But it will get him more attention. There will be more focus and chatter and talk. And it will be an absolute freak fest for the Democrats. I mean, they are going to just do everything they can to make Aaron Rodgers look like the single kookiest, craziest nut job out there who's a danger to democracy. Watching all of that play out is going to be quite fun. Well, he will be the opposite of Colin Kaepernick for the media.
On Springfield's Talk 1041.
Someone sent a question on the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Hey, I want to know what Nick's stance is on the whole TikTok issue. For me personally, it feels like the government is only doing this because they know that they can control Facebook and Google. They have already proven that. All right. Yeah, I haven't really talked about this too much, other than we did briefly discuss it when Congressman Burleson was on earlier in the week. But I'll address this and give you some thoughts that I have on it coming up here in just a couple of moments. We do need to get the latest traffic update, also what to expect weather-wise in the coming days, storms ahead. I'm Nick Reed. First Alert Forecast sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. From Color 10 Fox 49, meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Showers, thunderstorms throughout the day, high near 77. More of that tonight, down to 47. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, kicking off the weekend, a high near 57. And then Saturday, mostly sunny, a high near 65. The question that came in on the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line was about TikTok and the banning of it. And the person who sent in the text was saying, well, my thoughts are kind of, hey, government can't control TikTok in America like they control Facebook and these other media outlets. And so that's potentially why they are looking to ban TikTok. Before I address that aspect of it, and let's talk about the Trump component. And Trump has been noted to have a different position on it now than he appeared to have in the past, where in the past he was like, yeah, that's a good idea, and now he's like, oh, not so much. Now, the reason that he is giving is that if TikTok goes away, that is the one socially, culturally prevalent social media platform in which the left wing doesn't essentially have total and complete control. We know we observed what happened with other social, and what continues to happen with other social media sites. Masquerading as the great arbiters of truth, you have these social media sites that squash any information that they feel is detrimental to their political causes, which are the causes of the left. The Hunter laptop story, of course, was really the example that had such a tremendous impact on the election, and the fact that these social media outlets suppressed it. TikTok does not seem to be vexed by this same form of censorship. And there's a lot of analysis out there as to why Trump is changing the position. And, some of it like, well, he kind of likes, he's become allies to some degree with, I guess, the guy who's head of TikTok or whatever. It's, I don't know the exact position, but it's a relationship thing, some people say. But largely what many people believe, it is that people who are not, talking just average Americans, who are not necessarily part of the establishment, who are not left-wingers, that they have a presence on TikTok, whereas they are not allowed to have a presence that is significant on these other social media platforms. And so this is an area in which a difference can be made potentially. And Trump has said if TikTok goes away, then you're going to have these other social media outlets. It's just going to be left-wing social media world in the United States of America. Now, I think it's fair to look at that and say, well, but still, if TikTok is problematic because China utilizes it in a way to try and do harm to the United States, simply because it's, beneficial to a campaign, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay. But on the other hand, if the whole point is what's best for the country, you could argue, I think legitimately, or are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater here? The TikTok banning, okay, is that good for America? If you say yes, it is. But Joe Biden's also bad for America. And so if getting rid of TikTok, which is good for America, ends up helping Joe Biden get elected president of the United States, which is bad for America, then they cancel each other out. So, that doesn't work. I don't believe that what is happening now is about the election, because it is massively bipartisan. Congress, the vast majority, I forget what the exact vote is, but I think there were only like 70-some that voted against it. Everybody else voted for a TikTok, quote, ban. Now, we should also specify, it isn't saying that TikTok cannot have a presence in the United States. It's simply saying if TikTok is going to have a presence in the United States, then China needs to divest. And it needs to not have China essentially cannot be running it. It's got to be somebody else. There's so many different paths to go down here. Now, let's look at that for a moment and ask ourselves, is that even a guarantee that that will be effective? Let's say that China divests itself and that, okay, so, it's got new ownership. Somebody else is running it. Do we really see that as a guarantee that that means China will no longer have influence? Some of that's going to depend on who the new ownership is. I mean, for Pete's sakes, arguably, China, at least in some capacity, has sway over the president of the United States in this country. Certainly has sway over Democrats. I mean, this is a dictatorship with concentration camps and slaves and literally a red carpet was rolled out for this dictator by Gavin Newsom. Streets that for average Americans are normally littered with feces and hypodermic needles were cleaned up to look pristine for the dictator. So my point being here is I don't know that, and it doesn't mean that it's not the right move, that if we end up in a scenario where, okay, China, they're no longer in control of TikTok, that doesn't mean that they're not still going to have some sort of influence or some sort of infiltration component. I'm just not confident of that. And I think it's naive to believe that that is somehow, there's going to be this magic wall that exists and that China's going to go, oh, well, okay. I mean, China works its way into everything. Look at our university campuses here. This is a country that has police stations set up in the United States of America, patrolling Chinese Americans. And we're a sovereign country. So having TikTok as an entity somehow pulled away from China is not, to me, an assurance that China is not going to still have influence in some capacity. Again, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done, but I think that's just something that is worthy of noting. I'm going to get a traffic update here, and then there are a few different points that I want to hit on this. And if you have not noticed at this point, I don't necessarily have a black and white stance on this. And I think that there are a number of different components in here. I think that there are worthy arguments on, quote, both sides. But I don't find myself saying that, oh, well, this side is 100% right and everything they say is valid versus this side. And that's, frankly, sometimes how life is. And for me, this is one of those issues. And so a few other points on it coming up here. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. We got Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Well, severe thunderstorms, they are going to be rolling into the Ozarks today and tonight as well. I saw that Color 10, they were reporting that some areas may see baseball-size hail and other areas could see 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gust. Now, by the way, those storms are going to hit Springfield around 3 p.m. And if all of that is true, then some of you are probably going to experience some roofing issues. So that's why I want to tell you about Josh and his team over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, with the Pyramid team, they're not going to try to take advantage of you because there's severe weather moving in. They do understand that your home is the largest investment that you will make, so they want to help you protect it the best you can. So whenever you call Josh, they'll come out, they're going to do a thorough roof inspection, and then they're going to come up with a plan that's going to work best for you. And then they can also help you walk through that insurance process too, which I really appreciated because whenever I called them, I was a brand new homeowner, and that was just something I had never done before. So I really appreciated it. So today, if you do experience any problems with your roof, remember the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, you can find all of the contact information for Josh and his team under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
TikTok. Congress, bipartisan. We love bipartisanship, right? Bipartisan overwhelmingly voted in order to ban it as long as it continues to be run by China. China gets separated from it, then all is cool. Okay, now I don't know the logistics of exactly how those determinations are made, but this is what we're looking at here. It will be interesting to see from a political standpoint how this is dealt with. If it passes the Senate, if it gets to Biden, what he will do. Because on one hand, you have bipartisanship here that is based off of the idea that this is being used in order to harm the United States, that this is a national security issue. In fact, an executive order was signed that people with their phones, government phones, they are not allowed to have this on their devices because our government's position with President Biden as the chief executive here is that it is a national security issue. So for him to veto it could be very problematic in terms of perception that already when it comes to foreign policy issues and dealing with our enemies, Trump, according to polls consistently, people have more confidence in him doing that than they do Biden. By the way, I don't know that this isn't a coincidence or that it is, but there's a report coming out that during the Trump administration, Trump utilized the CIA in order to get an upper hand over China to run some sort of operation. I'm not sure what details are out yet, but it appears as if this is potentially a presentation that here's an area in which Trump was very tough on, had a suspicious eye on China, was not naive to China. Now, of course, he is, again, at the same time, now positioning himself as being against outright banning of TikTok, but he could focus that messaging in and saying, no, I think it should still exist, but I agree, China shouldn't be a part of it. So there's just so many different spokes in this wheel. But back to whether or not, if this gets to Biden, whether he signs it or not signing it politically could be problematic, but signing it also could be problematic because I'm telling you, right now, they're already worried about losing the young vote. There are increasing numbers of polls that show that Trump, amongst the younger voters, which has long been a loyal, solid block for the Biden or for the Democrats, is moving over to Trump. And I'm telling you, they're talking about it. People who utilize TikTok, and not just for funsies, but they have careers, revenue streams. I mean, this is their, they're influencers, and they make a living off of it. and to have a demographic of individuals that, let's not forget, at one point several months ago, it was revealed the plan of the White House was to use TikTok influencers to essentially campaign on behalf of Joe Biden. So to go from recognizing or believing that TikTok and its most popular users could be influential in helping your campaign to cutting their livelihood off, to signing legislation that is going to cut off all of that for them, that's not necessarily an enviable position for Biden to be in. And maybe in the Senate he can rely on Chuck Schumer to block this stuff up so that it never gets to his desk. That would probably be his best bet. Now, regarding the freedom, the liberty aspect of this, and I'll use as a launching point for my thoughts on this a text that was sent in. Using congressional power to ban any communication app is beyond the scope of the authority and unconstitutional. I was extremely disappointed in Congressman Burleson in his statement that he made on your show. If they believe that they have proof that there are security issues, then they should focus on that, if anything. Continuing to say, well, let's just go ahead and ban news agencies from outside the U.S. that the government deems harmful. Now, I'm just going to throw out some thoughts and ideas on this aspect of it. Some people say that banning this, including people that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, that it is a free speech issue. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, though I don't disagree either. I don't know where I fall on this, and here's why. It is not about the speech that is on the app. It is about the fact that it is a device that is being used by China in order to try and do harm to the United States in a number of different ways. And it isn't as if this is something in which we are talking about banning the ability of people to utilize platforms. There are a number of them out there. This is about whether or not we will allow a country that has declared us an enemy, wants to do us harm, whether we should allow them to, in the United States, have a platform in which they allow people to post videos while at the same time utilizing it to try and do harm to the United States. And it isn't just, by the way, our government. A lot of the things that China recognizes as culturally detrimental, they push on these social. It's China is very smart. They're very long-term thinking, and they are at war with us, and they have been for some time, and they do it in a number of different ways, not the traditional ways. One of the ways is the fentanyl across the border. They're trying to break us down culturally. And TikTok is one of the ways that they do that. Now, some will say that they believe that free speech still covers the right of a foreign enemy to utilize a platform in the United States for those purposes. And I understand that. But I do think that reasonable people can look at it and say, that's not free speech, because you're not telling people that they aren't allowed to say or do certain things. It's simply telling a foreign country that we're not going to allow you to have your platform here for those purposes. We're going to take traffic, and then I want to hit a couple of other, draw some parallels here that might provoke you to think, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way before, when it comes to the issue of banning TikTok, or at least saying, hey, TikTok, that's fine. China just can't be running it. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. I don't think saying because TikTok is China-owned goes over well with me personally. There are many China-owned companies in the U.S. Heck, I think KFC is owned by a Chinese group. I don't know whether that, but that could very well be. So this is the difference. Whether it makes a difference in your perspective on this or not is up to you. Is that the reason that TikTok is being focused on and what differentiates it from other China-owned products or companies is that TikTok is actively being used in order to try and do harm to the United States. So think of these things as well. There's this whole other conversation that's going on that seems to be much less controversial, and that is whether or not we could ban Chinese companies from owning land in the United States. Now, there are some people that say, no, listen, hey, it's a free country. Anyone, no matter what the reason, anyone should be able to buy land. But I think that there are some similarities here. And if one says, yes, we should not allow China to buy land because they're trying to buy up all this agricultural land, they're trying to do it, and because they may use it for nefarious purposes and they are our enemy. Well, that's the same argument that's being used for saying, well, okay, as long as TikTok's controlled by China, then we should not have that here either. There are states and states all across the country, I know Kansas recently dealt with this and others, that have been looking at banning drones that are utilized by law enforcement because of the massively high percentage of drones that are built in China. And the concerns, of course, are that China will potentially have something in those drone devices that allow them to track, gather information on the United States. And so, again, one could argue, hey, listen, it's a free country and we shouldn't start banning products simply because they are controlled by China. But then when it comes to things like drones, I think that there are similarities there that, well, that's also a product. So, again, it's not meant to necessarily change your mind one way or another, but I think that sometimes we find ourselves okay with saying, yes, I'm fine with banning this product that is made out of China for national security purposes, but something like this I'm not, and just sort of doing a self-check as to whether or not we're consistent. Into spring, gotta be into summer. Do you find yourself doing the same thing every season? If you get through these patterns and you're like, oh, the weather's gonna change. And I find that it makes time go by faster, which isn't necessarily a good thing as you get older, because you're like, another year, I'm closer to death. Maybe you ought to do something different. Enjoy life a little bit. And if you've ever known anyone, and maybe you fall into this category who's own an RV, then you know that this is a real lifestyle change that can be a complete enhancer to your life. Get out, do something different, enjoy the outdoors, while at the same time having the luxury of the indoors right there, just feet away. Wilder RV. They are the go-to for your veteran RVers. However, if it is a world that you've thought about, but you're just like, I don't know even what I don't know, I don't want to look like some sort of idiot, then your go-to is also Wilder RV. It is an extremely well worth it drive, up 13, just a little over an hour in Clinton, Missouri. They have tremendous amount of options. They are low-key. In other words, you're going to get there and you'd say, listen, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know this is live. They're going to ask you just a few key questions. Yeah, like, do you have a family? What do you, this, that, and so forth? And then they're going to say, all right, out here in the lot, I'd start with these over here. Then you may want to hit these over here. Here's why. And then you have at it. They'll check in with you every so often. They're not going to follow you around, trailing you like, well, now I have the key. I'll let you in and stand there as you look around and so forth. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And any questions you have. They're fantastic. And so I would recommend that, particularly, again, you get into these ruts and you're just doing the exact same thing summer after summer, and it could be such an enhancement to your life to experience that lifestyle. Give yourself, your family that gift, and it's all starting for you, Wilder RV, wilderrv.com, also at ksgf.com, Nick's endorsements. You know, I just want to say a couple other things before we move on about this, the talk and the vote of the TikTok ban, which isn't really, it is, but it isn't banning TikTok. It is banning TikTok as long as it's controlled by China. I happen to enjoy this as a subject because it's a thinker, if you will. Now, there are some people that do not, frankly, have the ability to think. And so for them, I think that they just kind of try to figure out, all right, well, what does my side say on this? Or how does it affect me personally? And that's, their position on it. But, most of you are thinkers. And I think this is a thinker because there are a lot of things about it that, on one hand, you look at it and you go, okay, well, that makes sense. We think, well, wait a minute. But over here, I say this. That's kind of a contradiction. And I out of the gate, I look at this and I think to myself, well, I have free speech, right? But then I also look at the fact that we don't seem to have a problem as a country agreeing that, or have a major problem. Some people do, but it doesn't seem controversial to say that people from China can't buy land here in the United States. And there's a large concern, particularly when it comes to the issue of agriculture. But you could, is that inconsistent to say, well, I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay with banning TikTok because you're talking about Chinese ownership. Drones, I used as an example at the end of last hour as well, that drones are something law enforcement agencies use, and most drones are made in China. And a number of different states have taken up that issue as to whether or not to ban the usage, at least by government, which, of course, throws another component into the argument here when you're talking about government versus the private citizen. But the point behind the banning of it used by government is because of concerns that China could utilize those drones as a conduit to do harm to the United States in terms of national security. Not like using it to attack the U.S., but gathering information, for example. Drones are perfectly legal. But if it is being used by an enemy to do harm to the United States, then is it okay to say, well, we're not going to purchase those, at least as government entities? That does not seem to be controversial. We are allowed to fly in balloons over the country. But we all had a real problem with a Chinese spy balloon flying over. Why? Because that balloon was doing, the purpose was to gather information, not for good reasons, but because they see the United States as an enemy. And I thought to myself, well, what if, and again, I'm not telling you one way or another, or this is the right answer, wrong answer. These are just some things to think. And this is the stuff that was going on in my head as I try and figure out where I fall on this. What if we found out that, let's say, a skydiving company, there's some skydiving company, and they have, it's a national company, and they've got, just little, pockets of, every state, they have a couple of different, businesses, and, you just go, and you can be an amateur, and they take you up in the skydive, just skydiving, right? And then we find out at some point that the skydiving company is owned by a Chinese company, and what they're actually doing while they're taking people up to skydive is they are gathering information. They are evaluating, maybe all these skydiving fields, they're close to military installations or something. They're essentially utilizing the skydiving business in order to gather information on the United States. Would we have a problem saying, you can't do that anymore? We're going to shut you down, or you can sell the business to someone else that's not you. I believe most Americans would not have a problem with that. Because while having a skydiving school, skydiving's perfectly legal, owning a skydiving business is perfectly legal. But if you're using it as a tool, as a conduit for nefarious purposes, as a foreign nation, then, no, we don't want that. I think that's similar to TikTok. Apps are legal. Social media apps are legal. Free speech, obviously. But it's being used by a foreign country in order to do us harm. So there's just a few things for you to think about. And perhaps while oftentimes you come here for clarity on issues, I have made things worse for you. But, that's the way it is sometimes. News. First Alert Forecast sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements from meteorologist Tom Schmidt, Color 10 Fox 49. Shower storms throughout the day, a high near 77. Shower storms with a low of 47 tonight. Mostly cloudy, 57 tomorrow. Saturday, mostly sunny. I have 65. A1 Custom Car Care, all of your car care needs, pre-purchase inspection. This is one of the single most important things you can do if you are purchasing a vehicle that has been previously owned. And it'll cost you a couple bucks, but it is going to save you so much potentially in the long run. I've been on both sides of this issue before. I was aware of this years and years ago, and I purchased a vehicle without having that full evaluation, and it ended up being one of the worst financial decisions I ever made. Looked great, drove great, thought, Carfax said it was fine, but it was nothing but problem after problem after problem, and I eventually ended up selling it for like $800 cash. It was just an absolute nightmare of a scenario, something I could have avoided if I had had that pre-purchase inspection from A1 Custom Car Care. On the flip side, when I bought my most recent vehicle, a truck, found one online locally before I even looked at it in person. Had it taken to A1 Custom Car Care. They did that inspection, and they told me, here's what we found. These are some of the things that you're going to, definitely need to do. It needs work and so forth. And for me, the decision was, and that's not worth it. Next vehicle, different story. There was some standard wear and tear, about $800 or so I needed to put into it just for routine maintenance stuff to keep it up to date, but it was well worth it. Cannot stress enough the importance of having that done. Ask them at A1 Custom Car Care what it involves, that pre-purchase inspection. You can find A1 Custom Car Care, KSGF.com, Nick's endorsements. There is an Associated Press story. Death of non-binary teen Nex Benedict after fight ruled as suicide, Oklahoma medical examiner says. Now, I think we all know out of the gate, we are supposed to believe that this is a suicide that is the result of bullying, specifically because this is a non-binary individual, and the reason that the non-binary individual here killed herself, they say themselves, but I just cannot be grammatically incorrect when I just can't. It is against everything. I can't physically be grammatically incorrect on this when it comes to these pronoun things, so the they, them. I can physically misgender someone. I can say he for somebody. This is she, but the saying they and them, it's wrong. Just can't. It's grammatically immoral. Can't do it. So we'll go with she. The inference here is that this is an individual who killed herself because she was being bullied, and being bullied because she was non-binary. I'll read through the story, and if you notice, however, other than just the inference that one is supposed to take because of the narrative that's put out there, there's absolutely no information that indicates that's the case. The death of a non-binary student the day after a fight inside an Oklahoma high school restroom has been ruled as suicide, the state medical examiner's office said Wednesday. A summary autopsy report was released more than a month after the death of 16-year-old Nex Benedict, a student at Owasso High School. Family members said Benedict had been bullied at school, and the teenager's death in February drew concerns from LGBTQ plus rights groups, as well as attention from Oklahoma's governor and the White House. Well, of course. Quote, from the beginning of this investigation, Owasso police observed many indications that this death was the result of a suicide, said Owasso Police Department Lieutenant Nick Boatman in a statement. Quote, however, investigators did not wish to confirm that information without the final results being presented by the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office. In a 911 call February 8th, Sue Benedict, the teen's grandmother and legal guardian, had expressed concern about a head injury. The teenager was conscious and alert after the fight a day earlier when she told police about the attack by three girls that occurred after the teen squirted the three girls with water, according to police video released last month. The report shows Benedict had toxic levels of 2 drugs in her system and died of an overdose. A complete autopsy will be released in 10 days in accordance with state law, the medical examiner's office said. Boatman would not confirm whether or not police found a note from Benedict at the scene. A lawyer for the Benedict family, Jacob Bibley, told the AP that he was working on a statement from the family Wednesday but declined to comment further. In video footage from the hospital the day of the altercation, Benedict explained to an officer that the girls had been picking on her and her friends because of the way that they dressed. Benedict claimed that in the bathroom, the student said something like, "Why do you laugh like that?" referring to Benedict and her friends. Quote, "And so I went up there, I poured water on them, and then all three of them came at me," she told officer from the hospital bed. Paramedics responded to the family's house, performing CPR on the teen before rushing her to the hospital, where she later died. Family members said Benedict was non-binary, which means that she doesn't identify as male or female. Quote, "Bullying and harassment have a significant impact on students, and, tragically, many of these youths believe that suicide is the only option for peace," said Brandon DeLoari, a case manager at the Rainbow Youth Project USA, an Indiana-based group that aims to improve the safety and wellness of LGBTQ plus young people. Quote, "This is not an isolated incident by any means." The group reported a dramatic spike in calls from Oklahoma to its national crisis hotline after news of the teen's death became public. Now, if you take out the non-binary component to this and still had this story written, but all of that part was left out, you would not find yourself saying, "Well, wait a minute, I don't understand what happened here." In other words, there's nothing in the story that indicates that any of this had anything to do with non-binary sex. See, this is being presented as, well, here we go again. Here is yet another individual who simply was being who she is, and because of that, she was bullied so badly that she felt suicide was the only option. Now, perhaps there is information out there that shows that that is the case. Thus far, none of that information has been made public, or at least by way of the Associated Press in this news story. The information in this story shows a girl admitting that she went over and poured water on these other girls in the bathroom because they were making fun of her clothes, and that the girls then in turn laid a beat down on her, which, of course, you should not do, and they should be disciplined for that. I think most people would recognize and understand that in a situation like that, the reason they did it was probably because the girl poured water on them. There's nothing in here that indicates that this is an LGBTQ plus, which, by the way, what does the LGBTQ plus have to do? I guess, what does the plus cover non-binary? I mean, does non-binary mean that you're a lesbian or gay or bisexual or transgender? I don't think that it does. But, of course, this is what they do, and you and I understand this. They just lump them all together. Now, you do have, the consideration here of bullying and so forth. But this insistence of taking every individual who is in a certain category, and if something bad happens to them, automatically labeling it because they are. Somebody doesn't get seated fast enough at a restaurant. Oh, do you fit one of these boxes? Well, that's because you're this box. Somebody gets cut off in traffic. If they happen to be in a certain demographic, well, it's because you are that demographic. If you don't get hired or you don't get a promotion, do you check off a box or two? If so, well, that's why it happened to you. You get into a fight with someone, you pour water on them, and they turn on you for doing so. Do you check off one? Oh, you're non-binary? Well, you're being bullied because you're non-binary. And again, it isn't to say that in some of these instances, those aren't the reasons, but the automatic default in telling individuals who already have some sort of psychological issues going on that every bad thing that ever happens to them, it is because they are them. That's what drives some of these people to dark places. It isn't because the world is mean to them, because guess what? And this is a newsflash for a lot of people in these marginalized groups. Bullying, being made fun of, having your feelings hurt, you don't have a monopoly on that simply because you are in one of the little checked boxes. This is something that most people in some capacity go through in elementary school, middle school, junior high, and high school. And while there are those few, because of their status in school, that are not going to probably deal with it, because they're very popular and everyone likes them, it doesn't mean that they don't have problems and conflicts and insecurities themselves. The fact of the matter is, however, the vast majority of young people at some point deal with this sort of thing. It is not emotionally beneficial in any way to continue to present scenarios like this as evidence that when bullying occurs, or that if you are non-binary, or if you are LGBTQ+, that you are the only, that if bullying occurs and it involves you, that's why it happened. You're being targeted. I got picked on. I can think of specific, because those things they do, they stick with you. I can think of very specific moments in my mind. What do I blame it on? You know, I was just a straight white kid. What do I blame it on? Taking young people in particular that are already emotionally vulnerable and clearly confused, and then using a situation in which they are dealing with conflict, which virtually every young person does at some point, using that as an opportunity to further convince them that the entire world is against them because of who they are, that is not positive for that child. To convince them that the world is against them, other than, well, me and my little organization here, but if you got to watch out because they're coming for you. The idea that somehow that is supportive. If we want to try and figure out in the equation what sort of how it is that we communicate with young people who are on the receiving end of unfortunate things like bullying, and you've got a couple of paths here, but if you're wanting to look at how, what message to give them that is most likely going to make things worse, I would argue it's this message that, yep, this is what you have coming because of who you are. The whole world's against you. Your life is in danger. Is it any wonder some of these people find themselves thinking that there's no escape when the people who claim to be their champions, the people who claim that they are there to help them, are the ones feeding them this message of darkness and that there is no hope? And then they wonder, well, why do they think that there's no way out? Why do they think suicide's the only way out? Well, gee whiz. When the people that they think care about them the most are giving them these messages of darkness and doomsdayness, it's not really that difficult to figure out. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 104.
Let's jump over to traffic here. 90 seconds from there. Look at the weather and more ahead. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk at text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. From Color 10, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Showers, thunderstorms throughout the day. High near 77 today, tonight. Showers, thunderstorms, low of 47. Cloudy 57 tomorrow, Saturday, mostly sunny, high near 65. Text, every kid gets bullied about something. Even a couple of close friends have something on you. Get over yourselves. And when did parents stop teaching their kids about the sticks and stones? Names will never hurt me. This is something that many of us grew up hearing. These were the lessons, so many of the lessons that we were taught in kindergarten. We would be so much better off today. And the idea, which I understand the motivation. The motivation is kid says something to another kid, and the kid, especially if you've got kids, your kid, comes home crying because their feelings are hurt. That's hard. Somebody hurts their feelings, says something mean, devastates them. They feel bad about themselves. That's hard as a parent. Selfishly, what over time many of us in our culture have begun doing is trying to prevent them from ever having those experiences. And I say selfishly because that makes us feel better. And the reason that I see it as selfish is because it doesn't, in terms of the overall health and long-term of that child who is supposed to learn and grow up, it doesn't help them. It renders them defenseless. If you never, ever, ever teach somebody how to do something, they will never know how to do it. If you never teach somebody how to deal with having their feelings hurt, then they are going to, their entire life, have their feelings hurt. and not know how to deal with it, not understand I can get over this, not understand I don't care, I don't need to, what do I care what that person thinks about me? What has been the opposite approach that has been taken in the name somehow of protecting kids is to prevent them from crafting an emotional immune system, if you will. And I don't mean makes you immune from emotion, but an immune system that allows you to get over, and just like any sort of disease, a flu, it doesn't mean that, your immune system doesn't mean that you never get sick. I mean, just this past week, if you've been listening, I've talked about my throat, my head, I've only mentioned it because it can affect, get to coughing and so forth, and I know that's annoying, and so I felt compelled to, just apologize. I have an immune system. It doesn't mean that I don't get sick, but what it does mean is that I'm able to fight it off and get past it. Now, what happens if somebody has no immune system and they catch a cold or get the flu? Well, it can be devastating and can kill them. Emotionally, if you have a, quote, immune system, and somebody says something hurt, or something just bad happens in your life, it may not be somebody intentionally trying to hurt you, you didn't get a promotion, you lose a friend, whatever it is, it doesn't mean, because you are an emotionally stable person who has an immune system emotionally, that doesn't mean that doesn't hurt. But what it does mean is that you are equipped to navigate through it. But if you, from a very young age, have been protected from ever having your feelings hurt, you have been protected from ever experiencing disappointment, you have been protected from ever having to deal with those things, and then you grow up and you're out on your own, and then something sad or devastating happens to you, somebody betrays you, you hear that somebody says something mean to you, and you don't have that emotional immune system, it's devastating. You don't know how to deal with it. And unfortunately, it leads to some people who, quote, don't know how to escape it other than killing themselves. This is why I watch with, one, it's an amazement because as human beings, we are supposed to be superior to all other living creatures. Yeah, we do some of the dumbest crap, some of the most counterproductive stuff. And culturally, and particularly those that fly the banner of compassion and caring, it is amazing for me to watch how devastating they are to young people. This whole transgender thing is a tremendous example of that. How they are the really, in terms of emotional health, they are the biggest enemy to young people. And while I am amazed by it, it's very sad at the same time because you see these young, you can see it on their faces oftentimes. If you're just walking around, the difference between a young person, and listen, I know that there is a nature component to it, but so much of the nurture component, so much of the environment is having this impact. And you could just see the difference. Sometimes you see some of these young people, and they're just expressionless almost. They're just empty. There are no scars of which they've learned to overcome. There's no depth there because of this desire to constantly protect them. And then, in addition to that, the piling on in a negative way is telling them that that the world is after them because you're LGBTQ plus or whatever. You're non-binary or whatever. So they, in their minds, there's no winning ever. In their minds, that they are in a world that is a complete uphill battle that they can never, ever, ever overcome. Because at every corner they turn, there's hate against them. Every corner they turn, there are people that want to, quote, eliminate them. And their minds get filled with that devastating darkness by people who think sometimes they think that they're helping them. There's a new study out, 2020 study. Wait, is this the one? Let's see. Yeah, okay, so a 2020 study is back in the news again after a journalist highlighted its eye-opening conclusion, which undermined one of the central arguments of the transgender movement. The study, which was carried out in California, published by the American Urological Association, found that men who had transgender surgery, which is technically referred to as a vaginoplasty, were more likely to commit suicide after the operation than before. Now, of course, this is completely contrary to what we're told. And what we're told is not based in any legitimate studies, and that is, and this is, it's amazing to me that you have these people, kids that already have confusion, emotional issues, they're grappling to try to find some sort of truth to hold on to, and then they have medical professionals and counselors and doctors tell them, well, you're just in the wrong body, and if you don't have transgender surgery, you'll probably kill yourself. Oh, well, gee, I can't imagine why that's not an uplifting message. I can't imagine why we have more young people out there thinking that they want to have sex change operations. I mean, if you're already depressed and sad and confused, and you're told by people that are supposed to be professionals that care about you that you're going to kill yourself if you don't do this thing, well, when it comes to actual true studies, we're finding out it's quite the opposite. And it makes sense, by the way. The results were neatly summarized by health and science reporter Benjamin Ryan, who has written for a variety of liberal news outlets, including The Washington Post, New York Times, and The Guardian. Among others, he explained the study finds that the attempted suicide rate amongst transgender women who received, so this is men who got fake vaginas put in, the attempted suicide rate was twice as high during the period after the surgery compared with the period before the surgery. So in other words, they find that when it comes to the suicidal rate here, that not only are lives not being saved by having sex change operations, but in this particular study in California, one of the areas of the country in which this sort of thing is most welcome and celebrated, the suicide rate is actually higher for people after they go through the surgery. And let me tell you why, just from a common sense standpoint, this makes sense to me. You're a person, whether you're a young person or maybe even adult, you feel lost. You feel isolated. You feel confused. You don't know why. Nothing helps. Your friends tell you just to get over it. Nobody understands. I mean, some of you that are listening right now, you understand this. You've been through this. Some of you may be going through it right now. A sense of absolute hopelessness. Maybe you've been going through it for years. And then it gets compounded because people who are your friends, family, you find that they want to be around you less and less, and it's because of you kind of know it's because of you, and it just makes things worse. It's this horrifically dark hole. And then somebody comes along and tells you, I have the answer. It would be as if you believe, or you have a fatal disease. You have a fatal disease. And the death is going to be long, painful, miserable. And somebody comes along and says, I have a cure. You're not going to die. How? Of course, what are you going to do? Give it to me. Now, there's an entire industry and some people that I do think they've been caught up in this and they genuinely think they're doing good. They tell people who have that emotionally fatal disease, if you will, that depression, that, oh, I have the answer. It's a sex change operation. You're in the wrong body. Here, let me just ask you a few questions. Oh, yep, this is what it is. They show you studies that people just like you commit suicide at a higher rate if they don't have a sex change operation. So you go through it, believing that this is it. You go through the painful surgeries. You're taking these different medicines in whatever form they are. By the way, the maintenance that people have to do on themselves, particularly men who have the vaginoplasties in, it is pretty horrific, because what occurs is that the body is actually trying to heal itself, and on a daily basis, sometimes more than once a day, they have to physically prevent their bodies from healing themselves manually. I think you can understand what I'm talking about here. It is painful. It is awful. That's just one of the many aspects of this. And so you go from somebody that was already in a very dark place that you thought couldn't get darker. You were told by someone, I have the fix for you. And then you find that not only did it not fix you, but now you have these physical issues to deal with. Is it any wonder that we see an increased rate in suicide of those people? It's horrific. By the way, the National Health Service in England has issued a ban on puberty blockers for kids. And even the Labour Party, the left-wing party in England, the Labour Party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has finally decided on transgender people competing in sports, admitting he believes biological males should not be able to play against women. We are way behind the curve on this stuff. And while the rest of the civilized world is recognizing the horrific, morbid, devastating damage that they have been doing to young people, they are at least saying, we're sorry, we made a mistake, we're going to put a stop to this. While here in the United States, you have an entire political party. You have media apparatus. You have medical professionals that are saying full steam ahead. This is a horrific humanitarian stain on the United States of America. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed.
Read in the morning on Springfield's Talk 104.1.
Now, aside to the damage, the humanitarian, devastating damage that is being done to people, particularly young people, with this transgender movement, a movement that the civilized world, with the exception of the United States, is backing away from. All this, even not just the sex change operations, but the puberty blockers and so forth over in the UK and other European nations, they're seeing the devastating effects. They're stopping it. For whatever reason in this country, led by, it's politically the Democrat Party, they're doubling down. It's just doubling down. But there are other victims when it comes to this, and I've highlighted this in the past. It's women. You know, they talk about transgender, and so forth in the context of, listen, if an adult, I don't care what you do as an adult. You know, there are people who have limbs removed because they feel as if, there's a name for it, it's a psychological disorder, and they feel as if the person that they really are is somebody that doesn't have two legs or two arms. And this is, like I said, there's a name for it. These are individuals that they have to travel outside the country because it's not something that's done here in the U.S., because it's not medically necessary. For whatever reason, when it comes to sex change operations, this is a different application. But if someone has to have their leg cut off and they can find somebody to do it, I don't care what you do. But when we're talking about kids, and when we're talking about the rest of the world having to bow down before you for doing this, this is where we have problems. And when it comes to the transgender movement, if you notice, anytime an individual loses a scholarship because of a transgender issue, or loses a gold medal, or loses a race, or has a conflict because they're forced to take a shower with the opposite sex because of self-identification, every single time it's the woman who has to sacrifice. You don't hear stories about men losing gold medals or scholarships out to girls who identify as boys and then demand to compete against them. Now, you may have heard this story. I heard, I know this I think came about last week, but there are some follow-up stories on it. Female bartender convicted of a hate crime for shoving a man who identified as a woman after he went into the women's bathroom. Oregon. An Oregon jury convicted an off-duty female bartender of a hate crime for misgendering and pushing a male customer who used the women's restroom identifying as a female. After a 2-day trial last week, didn't take long for those left-wingers to put that woman in her place. 2-day trial, jurors found Cassie McIntyre guilty of second-degree bias crime and harassment charges for the December 2022 confrontation, which was caught on surveillance video at a Portland bar. Reese Larson, the man who identifies as a woman, testified that he had just exited the single-user women's bathroom when the female bartender, who had just finished her shift at the bar, accosted him and said that he should use the restroom, or should not use that restroom, but use the men's restroom because he was a man. Larson said that he tried to explain that he was actually a her, but that the female bartender swore at him and then shoved him. Surveillance camera captured the shove, but did not record any audio. Another customer testified that he heard the female bartender repeatedly use the male pronoun for him. The bartender said, "I wasn't trying to misgender him. I had to look up what transgender was in the dictionary. I find that a little hard to believe." Not the point, however. McIntyre testified that the man cut in line for the bathroom and pushed another female customer. Larson denied pushing anyone. McIntyre, the female bartender, claimed that she only pushed Larson as a way of making space for the women. Larson said that he cried while leaving the bar, later calling police. According to the Oregonian, he said that in our system, people are innocent until they're proven guilty, but in the real world, I was judged and sentenced within moments when Miss McIntyre decided to harass me. The judge sentenced McIntyre to 2 years probation, 50 hours of community service, which McIntyre's attorney said she hopes to complete in an LGBTQ nonprofit. So here a woman, she's put in her place. She learned her place as a woman because she hurt the feelings of a man while trying to protect women, mind you, in the women's restroom. This isn't a criminal punishment for physical assault. This is because of the bias law in which the woman misgendered the man, calling him a man, which she actually didn't misgender, she correctly gendered, but because they identified as a woman. So as I noted, this entire political transgender insanity that the rest of the civilized world is reversing themselves on because of the damage specifically to those in the transgender community, young people specifically. We now have women in the United States of America being convicted, community service, probation, because she called a man he. Now, you tell me there's not a, quote, war on women in this country. Coming up, a number of new polls in which Donald Trump is, again, consistently leading Joe Biden. We've got that plus more news in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. If you're looking for the absolute best when it comes to selling your home, buying your home, advice on your home, things you need to do to get it ready, curb appeal, how much of a difference does it make? I bet if you ask Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, what's going to help me sell my home faster? Remodeling my kitchen or, spending a tenth of that to upgrade our front yard for curb appeal? You may be surprised the answer. Now, I know the way I asked that question suggests that it would be the curb appeal in that particular scenario. I don't know. But what I've learned with Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, is that so much of what we think are the things that need to be done to put your house on the market are not things that are going to actually help you get more money. You could lose money. Then again, there are certain things that you may think, oh, I need to upgrade this so that I can get more money. And yeah, you do need to upgrade it, but it's just an expectation from the buyer. So it's not necessarily going to help you. This is territory that is uncharted for so many of us. But that's fine because you have Emily Johnson to help navigate you through it and to be your expert for all your home buying and selling needs. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. So an announcement yesterday, of course, came that there were 6 charges dropped in Georgia, 3 of which were Donald Trump. And largely it's because the judge found that these 3 charges, again, 3 for Trump and 3 for others, in which felonies were alleged, that Fani Willis didn't even say what the felonies were. And so the judge was like, yeah, you didn't even say what these felonies, you just said, oh yeah, we're charging them with this because they committed a felony, but you didn't say what the felony was. You can't really do that. You have to, Kafka the trial, right in front of us, and this judge was like, no, okay, we understand what's going on here, but that's just a little too far. So that was what that was about. Also, a few polls, former President Trump entering the general election, leading Biden in Georgia by 3 points, according to a new CBS News YouGov poll. The poll included leaners and was published Tuesday. Find that 51% of the 1,133 registered voters sampled at the Peach State backed Trump for president head-to-head against Biden, who takes 48%. Trump has a double-digit advantage over Biden among independent voters, with 53 supporting Trump, only 42 Biden. So that is more unfortunate news for the Biden campaign. In Ohio, former President Trump is also leading. The poll, sponsored by Nexstar Media, released yesterday, shows Trump trounces Biden in a hypothetical head-to-head matchup in the Buckeye State. Of the 1,300 registered voters sampled across the state, 50% say that they will vote Trump, 41% Biden, another 9% undecided, but largely lean towards Trump. When the undecided demographic was pressed on which way it leans, 57% chose Trump, 44% Biden. So that's a 13-point lead in Ohio. Trump maintains the commanding lead over Biden in a larger field that includes RFK Jr., Cornel West, and Green Party candidate Jill Stein. In the 5-way race, Trump scores 47%, Biden 38%, Kennedy 6%, West and Stein each take 1%, 7% undecided there. And likely Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump leads Joe Biden in a North Carolina race, marked by a large portion of voters who are underwhelmed with their choices, according to an exclusive WRAL news poll released this week. Trump has a 5-point lead there, 50-45 among likely voters in the key swing state. The poll shows with 5% voters undecided. Trump led by 10 points among people who said that they're certain to vote in November. Biden had a larger 12-point lead among people who said that they'd probably vote but weren't completely certain. Notably, a majority of likely voters aren't happy with the prospect of the rematch, so forth. Looking more deeply into the numbers, Meredith College political science David McLennan said signs of serious trouble emerged for Biden, with 60% of Republicans saying that they were fine with the Trump-Biden matchup, but 67% of Democrats and 71% of independents said they wished for different candidates. Quote, That's really problematic in terms of trying to get your votes to come out this fall, he said, of Biden's reelection campaign when you talk about a third of your own party's voters are glad to have you and two-thirds are not. I can't remember a presidential candidate being in that situation in recent history. But hey, they decided to move forward with him anyway. Author of the Week coming up, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. First, the latest news update. First Alert forecast sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Showers, storms throughout the day. Today, high near 77. Tonight, showers, storms, low of 47. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, 57 and 65 with sunshine Saturday. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Well, from handguns to home defense shotguns, Quick Draw Gun in Monette has it all. Now, Brad and his team, they expanded their shop probably about a year ago so they could have even more inventory and better serve you. Now, I think that one thing that really puts Quick Draw Gun a step above the rest is their customer service. Now, I talk about my purchasing experience and their customer service all the time, but if you read the reviews of Quick Draw Gun, you're going to see time and time again that people are just incredibly happy with their customer service too. So whether you are needing to do an ammo restock, you are looking to add to your firearm collection, you're looking for accessories, or you just want to gather more information so you can purchase your first ever firearm, Quick Draw Gun in Monette is the place to go. It's about an hour drive to the shop. It's just a straight shot down 60, and it really is worth the trip down there. Now, in the meantime, if you have questions or you are looking for something specific, don't hesitate to reach out to Brad and his team. You can find all of the contact information for Quick Draw Gun in Monette under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
All right, traffic update, and we will have Author of the Week, Jamie Truman. She is going to be joining us to talk about her book, Vanishing Fathers. Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. I'm Nick Reed. Springfield Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. It's Thursday, which means it's time for Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. And this week we have Jamie Truman, who hosts the Truman Charities podcast, a philanthropist's guide to charitable organizations, and is one of the co-founders of Truman Charities, an organization that is 100% volunteer-based. And she has the book Vanishing Fathers. Thank you so much for being with us. This is something that we talk about every so often, just the cultural impact, the real impact of it. And it's something that, politically speaking, so many people, I think even who recognize it, they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to offend certain segments of the population. But I want to start off asking, what prompted you to write the book Vanishing Fathers?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure. And, what happened is that, as you had mentioned, my husband and I started the volunteer-based organization, Truman Charities, about 14 years ago. We raised about $2 million for various charities. And so when I would talk to these founders of nonprofits, and we have about 4 or 5 per year, and there was kind of this underlying issue with, fathers not being involved, but it really didn't spark kind of my real interest until I started my podcast, and that's where I interview nonprofit founders, and I've interviewed, I think over 100 now. And that just seemed to be coming up every single time I was talking to people, is that these fathers were not there, they weren't involved, they had a very complicated or dysfunctional relationship with their father. And, personally on my side, I grew up and my father was, has substance abuse issues. And so I know personally how that affected me. But it wasn't until I started to talk to so many other people that I didn't, that I finally realized that this is a very large problem in our society.
I'm not an expert in this. I share your belief, and frankly, some of this, I don't even think one needs to be that much of an expert just to understand the realities of it. Some of it does seem kind of obvious, and men and women generally have these balances where women have certain attributes, men don't, vice versa. And I've always in my mind recognized the benefit of having, as a child growing up, a mixture of those two things. But something listening to you, I was actually listening to another interview that you did that I thought was interesting, is that because in my mind I just saw it as this timeline of shared benefit, but in reality, like the very early years right after birth is generally when the child benefits more from the mother. But then as we grow up and we get to more of the toddler age, that's when the father's characteristics come in to be beneficial. Talk about that a bit, if you would. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and let me give you an example. I had my first son with my husband, and I'm sitting there in my mind, I'm nursing. I just want to make sure he's fed and he's warm and comfortable, right? Like this is like, are they sleeping? Are they fed? Are they warm? Like those are the 3 things that go through like a mom's head, and that's all I'm thinking about. And I walk into the room and I'm like, what are you doing? I'm talking to my husband. He's like, I'm setting up their 529. I'm like, what? He's like, I'm setting up their college fund. I mean, like the way that the two people think are so different. Like it's the perfect yin and yang, right? And so, and then if you look, say if you're going to a park, let's go to another common sense, observation. So you go to the park and what do you see? Moms, and I see it myself. I'm very over, like we're very nurturing. So you don't want to get hurt. Oh my gosh, don't do that. That's going to hurt. That's how we speak to our kids. We have this nurturing. We really want to protect them. And then the dads come in and there's so much encouragement. They're like, no, go on the monkey bars. You fall. That's okay. Get back up, run. And they have that encouragement that gives kids the confidence to be independent.
There's you can easily find, I'll see them pop up on social media, and it's generally a dozen or so clips, and it'll be under the banner of, hero dads or something. And they're always funny clips like that. A dad catching the kid at the last minute, or doing, pushing the kid on the bike and goes down the hill and it's exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly is. Just to give your listeners a little bit of statistics, is that, and it's really, really astonishing when you look at it. If you look at youth and homeless youth, 90% of them don't have an involved father. 71 youth that have substance abuse don't have a father. 71 high school dropouts don't have a father. 70% of exploited girls don't have a father involved. Like, look how high these numbers are. And so it really is just, it was blowing my mind that we have all of these conversations going on, but we're not having this one. And it's affecting so many children.
We are talking with Jamie Truman, the author of the book Vanishing Fathers. There's at the same time these cultural evolutions that have been taking place. I mean, we're well in them now. And on one hand, it is the toxic masculinity, the demonization of that, while celebrating single moms. Celebrating almost as a virtue that they're not being a father in the picture. And it just seems as if from the two genders in which a child can most benefit, culturally speaking, they've been formulated into the worst case scenario for the kid.
Yeah, and I think that, and I had a couple people after I did my talk segment. I had a couple single moms reach out to me, and they were upset about the segment. And I tried to explain. I said, you know what? Read the book, because I have so much admiration and I have such high respect for single moms, because what they have is an impossible task, which is being two people. I was brought up by a single mother, and I saw the sacrifice and how hard it was, because as much as you try, you cannot be the father too, but you'll not stop trying. But it's an impossible situation that they're in, and they just have a much harder job on their hands. And I feel for them. I have a lot of empathy towards the single moms. But when we get down to it, we should be talking about what is the optimal situation for a child. And the optimal situation is for mother and father. And if the father, for some reason, and I talked to a lot of people in the book, they had lost their father, or say something happened with the father. The best thing that you can do is you have to, which I saw, is some sort of mentor or some sort of father involvement. Say, I spoke to a woman, and she had lost her husband, and her father really came in to help out, or you know what I mean? So there always has to be someone else helping, because we are built very differently. Biologically, women are, and men are biologically built very differently. So we bring equal traits, different traits to a child to help them become a very well-adjusted, secured, and loved child through their childhood, and so they're well-adjusted adult. And then I'm not saying that they won't be without a father, but it's just a little bit more of a difficult road. Well, and it puts a lot more pressure on the mother.
And I would imagine, to that point, the reason that the book is Vanishing Fathers is because that's the component that's vanishing. If it was Vanishing Mothers, that would be just as much of concern as well.
Absolutely. And as I said when I was talking earlier, when a baby's first born, they are so connected to the mother. Like, they are basically, their whole livelihood is based on me being around. So, and we bring other great attributes to this child, but it's just the optimal situation for a child is to have both. And we just really need to be speaking about this. And I don't understand why this conversation isn't happening with young adults. And they're actually more like young children. When we're going to these health classes and things of that nature, they should be reading about these stats. These little boys should know how important they are in society and what will affect their child if they're not around. And also girls understanding the effect that it will have on their children if the father is not around.
Well, and I wonder, too, as we talk with our author of the week, Jamie Truman, the book Vanishing Fathers, and we think vanishing in the sense that, okay, there's not a man there. Mm-hmm. But as we see more and more boys grow up, as into being a man that also didn't have a father, and at the same time downplaying the importance of fathers, the significance of fathers, how much of the vanishing father is the beneficial personality traits of the man that are missing. So in other words, maybe the father is in the picture, but he has been raised in a way that strips him of those character traits that are so important to pass along to the child.
I mean, that's something. And all I can say, and I talk about in this book, and that's why I think it's so important for parents to read and children to read, is that we're really embracing those biological traits, because masculinity is very important. And there is nothing toxic about this. And I hate when people throw that terminology around, because masculinity is what keeps society safe. And so, I was talking in one interview, and I said, let me explain it this way. I have a husband, I have 3 boys, and if somebody breaks in the house, my husband's the first one down the stairs. And if we have a fire, he's the last. So there should be some respect within that masculinity. When things hit, if, SHIT hits the fan here, we're looking for masculine men to save us. So these traits are they're so valuable within society. And instead of telling children and telling boys that that's bad, and that their masculine traits are bad, what we need to be doing is really celebrating those traits, because they are so valuable in life. I mean, it's valuable with my family. Like, I wouldn't feel safe unless my husband, if I know he's our protector. Like, I know if anything happens, and he's going to take care of us. And that's really, and I think that, every woman should feel that way.
Part of what you do in your book, Vanishing Fathers, in order to perhaps make it a little more digestible or relatable, or you share real-life stories with people that may be known by the reader, some better-known people, celebrity status to some degree, who have grown up with the challenges of a vanishing father, but were able to overcome them. Are there any of those in particular that you find maybe you get a lot of feedback on from the reader that says, man, that person's story really resonated with me?
Wow, it's been fantastic, because what I did, and I wanted to make sure, is that I had people from various backgrounds, all different type of circumstances, so people would know that even though you may have grown up without a father and you've had more of a difficult road, it's not impossible at all for you to grow up and be a strong man in society and be a wonderful and loving husband and father. So, it's hard to say, but, I know, we had Victor Marks on there, and he was wonderful. He went through the impossible when he was a child through abuse, and now he's a worldwide humanitarian, helping, hundreds of thousands of children and women that have been through some really terrible situations. And then, I spoke with Peter Grumble, and he was in a cult growing up, and then ended up graduating from Yale Law School, and has been wonderful within society and helping so many other individuals. I interviewed Justin Pugh, he plays for the Giants in the NFL, and he was a really interesting one, because I had interviewed him, and we first were going to talk about the loss of his father, and it really turned into this wonderful conversation about the involvement of his stepdad and how he really had so much influence on him. And that's kind of what I had said earlier. It's like, when you have a loss of a father, or they're not around, having someone else step in for that role and really taking over is so very important for young children. And that's just a couple. There's just so many other great stories within this. And the greatest, and the really great thing I think about this and in this book is that, I really want it to help so many people, so as many people as we possibly can. So 100% of the proceeds are going to be going to charity for at-risk youth, different charities. So, we're hoping that this will help in so many different ways.
Well, I appreciate you being with us this morning and the book, and I would really encourage people to pick it up, because there is this instinct. You noted the conversation that you had with a mother that was a single mother and taking offense to this. And people they feel, I think, as you do, sympathy for single moms. And so they don't want to feel as if they are insulting the abilities, that here they are undertaking something that is more difficult because they are a single mother. And I don't want to make them feel bad or as if they're failing, but that's not what this is about. And I think the book is done in a way that can help people realize that it's not about protecting the feelings of the mother, but what's best for the mother and the father and the child as well. The book is Vanishing Fathers. The author of the week, Jamie Truman, Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. You know, there's so
We're in the second week of the Biden's Best Moment bracket, sponsored by Pyramid Roofing Company. We got a 10-ounce bar of silver with a depiction of Mount Trumpmore. It's Mount Rushmore with the addition of Donald Trump on it. That is up for grabs, thanks to Pyramid Roofing Company. Every week that you vote in the bracket of Biden's Best Moments at KSGF.com, you get an entry in for that drawing, which will happen a couple weeks from now, I guess, at this point. So you can go to KSGF.com in order to try and win that. We've got weather in a moment. Severe thunderstorms possible in the next, into the afternoon, overnight hours. Now the latest traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. First Alert Forecast sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. From Color 10 Fox 49, meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Showers and thunderstorms throughout the day today, high near 77. Showers, storms, low of 47 tonight. Tomorrow, 57 Saturday, high near 65. Vladimir Putin on Wednesday warned the West that his country is ready for a nuclear war and said that he would consider the U.S. sending troops to Ukraine as a significant escalation of war. And so, of course, the Russian-Ukraine war is being positioned by the establishment as yet another reason that we cannot have Donald Trump as president, because we're told that Putin and Trump are buddies. This despite the fact that just weeks ago, Putin said that he prefers Biden as president of the United States because he fears he's more old school, he's more stable. We're supposed to ignore that and pretend that that didn't happen, of course. See, we're only supposed to listen to Putin whenever he says things that can be used against the political opposition of the Biden administration. If he says things that are complementary to the Biden administration, those things we are supposed to ignore and pretend did not happen, okay? So we understand how that works. Radoslav Sikorski, he is the foreign minister of Poland, and he was on MSNBC with Andrea Mitchell. And every opportunity that the media can have in order to trash on Trump, of course, they take. And it doesn't matter who the guest is. It could have Weird Al Yankovic on, and they're going to be like, so what do you think about Donald Trump, this, so forth. And then, of course, the guest is supposed to say something really bad about Donald Trump. This is how, it's sort of like a secret handshake that's not really a secret. It's almost the Heil Hitler sort of thing, where in Germany, you just said it to each other, and that's how you know, okay, yeah, this is how we demonstrate our solidarity and our recognition that this is the way, the truth, and the light, Heil Hitler. And for the media, it is the obligatory, we're going to ask you a question about Donald Trump, and then you're going to answer in a way that demonstrates you understand how bad he is. So Andrea Mitchell, with the foreign minister of Poland, of course, took the opportunity to do just that. And now the background of this is Trump, again, and he did this while he was president of the United States, successfully so, pressuring NATO countries to kick in their fair share. Not because it's, quote, fair, but because Trump recognizes that the more skin a person or a country or a culture has in the game, the more responsibility they're going to take, and then the better off they are. And the better off the individual parts of a collection are, the better off the collection is. And so Trump recognized that when you have an institution like NATO, and everyone is just kind of sitting around relying on the United States to carry the load, that is not as strong as that institution can be. The true strength is when everybody's hands are in the dirt. And that's why Trump, in an effort to make sure that NATO was stronger and would be more effective, he pressured, oftentimes through publicly shaming NATO countries, into increasing the amount of money that they put into it, and just to what they're supposed to, they're obligated to. They weren't even meeting their obligations. And this has come up again. And so Trump, in his normal way of illustrating a situation, makes comments that if you do not understand nuance or context, can be used in order to claim that he is making assertions he's not, which is exactly what was done. And so he's making the comment that, if NATO, listen, if these countries aren't even willing to take care of themselves, might as well just tell Putin, go ahead and invade. His point, of course, being is, if NATO, if the whole point of NATO is to be as secure as possible against an invasion of Russia, if they're not doing it, what's the point? It's all for show. Now, intelligent people, and I don't mean I have a bunch of letters after my name on a diploma, but I mean intellectually intelligent people, understand what his point was. But the media, of course, uses this, and you hear it on the campaign trail that Donald Trump is encouraging Russia to invade, to invade Europe. This is a repeat. We've heard this before, but it was in the form of Donald Trump told Russia to hack into our computers. This was when Hillary Clinton claimed that she couldn't find all these emails. Nobody could find them. And so at an event, he joked, maybe we should see if Russia could find them. Because that was the period of time that they were they were saying that Russia was hacking into emails. Hillary said she couldn't find them. And so, Trump joking, making the point of the absurdity of all of this, saying, well, maybe Putin can find them. I mean, Hillary can't seem to find them, and Putin seems to find these emails everywhere, so maybe he can. And that was used to claim that Trump was inviting Putin to hack into our email systems. This is the upgraded version of that. So the foreign minister of Poland is on with Andrea Mitchell, MSNBC, and the obligatory, okay, now is where you prove your allegiance to the truth. I'm going to ask you a question about Trump, and then you are going to subsequently talk about how dangerous he is to the NATO alliance. However, not how it went.
What would you say to Donald Trump, who actually said that he would encourage Putin to go into countries, NATO countries, that don't pay their fair share?
Well, we hope that's just flowery rhetoric. He's right that we should be spending more in Europe. Poland is spending well over 3% of GDP on defense. And we've placed $50 billion worth of defense orders in the United States.
How afraid are you of Russia invading you? You're right there on the border.
All right, now I played her subsequent question here for a reason, but first the bulk of it. Donald Trump, I mean, you heard him. He's inviting Putin to invade, to which the wrong answer, of course, was given. He dismissed what is the obvious and said, that was flowery language. Trump's point is right. Trump is right. We need to start kicking in financially what we are obligated to kick in. All of this is, there's an obvious point that gets missed here by the left. While they try to portray Trump as somehow a danger to NATO because he may not keep the United States' commitment to NATO, when Trump's entire point is that these other countries are not keeping their commitment to NATO. They act as if Trump's suggestion that we might pull out and, not keep that commitment is a grave danger to the world's stability. Yet that is what he is saying, that these countries are not keeping their commitment, and they need to keep their commitment. And the Polish foreign minister there backed up that assertion to Andrea Mitchell. Look at the stuff that invade. That's rhetoric. That's flowery. His point is this, and he's right. Now, Andrea Mitchell, there I played the audio where she just moves on. Are you afraid of Russia invading Poland? And that demonstrates that the media, again, has no intellectual curiosity. It is not they don't ask questions in order to learn. Because she asked a question, when he didn't give the right answer, she just moved on, as if it was just never even happened. She didn't even bother to push back. She didn't say, well, are you sure? I mean, don't you think that it might send the wrong message? Gave the wrong answer. He was supposed to trash on Trump. He was supposed to help Biden get reelected by talking about how dangerous to the world's stability Donald Trump would be as president. We've got to have Joe Biden in there. Since he didn't, let's just move on to something else. Because the point of networks like MSNBC is not to gather information and inform. It is not to learn. It is, in the context of the presidential election, get Joe Biden reelected. Now, just because it's within the context of NATO, I wanted to replay for you audio that I played in the past. And this is the more recent of the two audio bits from NATO Secretary General Jan Stoltenberg. And he was asked about Donald Trump inviting Putin to invade.
We have to listen and take note of the following. The criticism that we hear is not primarily about NATO. It's about NATO allies not spending enough on NATO. And that's a valid point. And it's a point and a message that has been conveyed by successive US administrations, that European allies and Canada have to spend more because we haven't seen fair burden sharing in the alliance.
So here you have the Secretary General of NATO in this past year, when Trump made those comments, saying that, listen, what the context of what he's saying is right. He said Trump wasn't criticizing NATO. He was criticizing the fact that NATO countries are not meeting their commitment. And he noted, by the way, Trump is not the first president to make these criticisms. Now, the difference is Trump wasn't doing it symbolically. Trump was doing it in a way that he felt would actually result in the countries increasing their contributions to become closer to their commitment. And guess what happened? It worked. So the difference is between past presidents and Donald Trump when it comes to the focus or criticism on NATO countries not contributing what they're committed to is that Trump was actually successful in getting them to do so. And just so we don't forget that this isn't a new theme, when Donald Trump was president of the United States and he was talking about, well, maybe if NATO countries are not going to abide by their commitment, then why should we? Maybe we should just pull out. And, of course, the media just went apoplectic. And, again, at that time, addressing those comments was Secretary General of NATO.
Recently, here in
This is with
Washington,
Brett
D.C.,
Baer
the
at the
House
time.
voted overwhelmingly on a measure that would require congressional approval for the president to pull out of NATO, because the president has threatened that he will pull out of NATO if other NATO nations don't live up to their financial commitment. He has since said, I'm 100% behind NATO. Do you really have any concerns that President Trump would pull the United States out of the alliance?
President Trump has been very clear. He is committed to NATO. He stated that clearly just a few days ago, and he did so also at the NATO summit in July. But at the same time, he has clearly stated that NATO allies need to invest more. And therefore, at the summit in July last year, we agreed to do more, to step up. And now we see the results. By the end of next year, NATO allies will add 100 billion extra US dollars for defense. So we see some real money and some real results, and we see that the clear message from President Trump is having an impact. NATO allies have heard the president loud and clear, and now NATO allies are stepping up. So this is good news, meaning that we actually see more fair burden sharing.
What an awful outcome. When it comes to all of this brouhaha over NATO and the consistent, from when he was president, now that he's a presidential candidate, the media utilizing the words of Trump to pretend as if this is a horrible thing for NATO, this is awful. You know, Biden's running around out there claiming that he's made NATO stronger than ever. Yet when you talk about the actual results of what Trump has said, whether you're talking to, and this has been consistent over the years, the Secretary General of NATO, or most recently on MSNBC, the foreign ambassador for Poland, they all say the same thing. Trump's point is correct, and Trump's pressuring has worked, and NATO is stronger for it. But those are just results, of course. That's actual reality. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Spring is almost here, so it's time to start planning those weekend road trips. And Avis, the car rental company, they want to help you get on the open road. Right now, it is a really good time to reserve your rental car because their rates are low and their inventory is high. And they've got vehicles for every lifestyle. So whether you are wanting to head to the beach and you want to take a sports car, you're heading to the mountains and you want to take a Jeep, or you just want to test drive an EV, they've got it all. And if you need a vehicle for a longer period of time, Avis, they also have their long-term rental program. Now, this long-term rental program, it's a great option if you want to test drive multiple vehicles for an extended period of time before you actually purchase a vehicle. It's got a lot of great perks, but I think that the best one is that you can swap out vehicles every couple of months if you wish to do so. So whether you need a vehicle for a day, a week, or even a year, Avis Springfield, they have got you covered. So if you have any questions, you want to reserve a rental, or you want to check out their current inventory, swing by the Avis store. It's located right here in Springfield off of Fort and Sunshine. And of course, you can find all of that contact information for Avis Springfield under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
So Haiti is the fourth country that the Biden administration has abandoned Americans left in life and death situations behind. Afghanistan was one of those. Sudan, which gets overlooked, where there were thousands of Americans stranded there. And while dozens of other countries were during civil war fighting and government toppling in Sudan just a couple of years ago, dozens of countries were doing everything they could to help their citizens get out. The Biden administration told Americans, good luck. Of course, we have seen still some of the kidnapping victims that are American and otherwise in Gaza and now in Haiti. American missionaries trapped in Haiti pleading for rescue on Tuesday, reporting constant gunfire around their hideaway and corpses riding in the streets. The group leader said the only assistance they've received from the Biden administration was advice to be safe. Jill Dolan of the group Love a Neighbor said the response she received from the U.S. Embassy under the Biden administration was just that. Her response was, okay, well, that's not really helpful. My fear is that we'll be caught in the middle of something really dangerous. We're already on the front lines of it. We're in a bad area. It's kind of depressing. It is unfortunate that this is, and the thing of it is, what we see with consistency is that other countries, by the way, this is what happened with Benghazi as well. We were the only embassy that did not get evacuated. The Red Cross had evacuated. Other embassies prior to that terrorist attack that our country claimed was spontaneous, they had evacuated their people. We did not. The United States is becoming synonymous with the betrayal of its own people, more so than any other country in this world. It began under the Obama administration, and Biden has said, hold my beer. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed.